we're managing on the edge of chaos. There's too many things for us to be able to control. We don't have the time or the effort or the energy or even the authority necessary to control everything that we need that's going to affect our projects. You look at third-party stakeholders and stuff like that, authority holding jurisdictions, permitting,
Hmm.
economic impacts, supply chain, you don't get to control that stuff. So what we need to do is focus on what are the things that move the needle, and I want to manage those viciously, malice and a forethought. I want to spend my time getting very, very sharp. I want to sharpen that pencil very, very sharp on the things that are going to move the needles.
Nils Gransberg, welcome to the Blueprint for Profit.
Hey, Skylar, thanks. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Nils is a highly respected construction consultant with a background that includes a PhD in engineering. He specializes in helping construction firms optimize their project management and embrace new technologies. He is focusing on advancing AI in construction to boost lead generation and automate tedious administrative jobs. Today, we're going to dive deep into how advanced engineering principles like the Pareto Principle can be used to manage projects with malice and forethought. We'll also discuss the evolution of construction technology and exactly where AI evolves. Where AI offers the most immediate and high impact opportunities for growth. Nils, thank you for joining us.
Good to be here, and I've been looking forward to our chat.
Me too. This is going to be fun. So, Nils, to start, for our audience of contractors and business owners, can you briefly describe your firm and the core challenges you help construction companies solve?
Sure. Yeah. So Gransberg and Associates is kind of a, I like to say we're kind of a unicorn. We're construction engineering management consulting firm. We're not very big, but we have a big, rather large or oversized influence in the sector we're in. So we kind of specialize in the public infrastructure sector, and we do a lot of work with federal agencies, state agencies, municipalities, public owners. We also do work kind of across the board with contractors, design firms, and whatnot. And so, a couple of our sweet spots are capital program development. So looking at how organizations can put together long range plans to be able to deliver multiple projects across multiple years, typically with a limited amount of funding, constrained resources and that sort of thing, and be able to deliver those in as certain of a manner as possible. So we one of the things we always try to help and steer our clients towards is embracing things like certainty instead of trying to focus on kind of the fallacies of cost savings. I
Hmm.
like to say you don't save any money when you're spending millions of dollars on a construction project.
Hmm.
I'm not going to save anything at the end of the day. If I've got money left over that I haven't used, it's not like I'm going to get a big gold star or pat on the back. It'd be better if I use that money to improve the overall performance of whatever that project is. So more
Right.
bang for the buck. It's hard enough to get money, and so we shouldn't let it sit around, and we should also be pretty deliberate in how we manage it, how we plan that out. So
Definitely.
we touch a lot of different types of work. Transportation, is real big. Roads, bridges, airports, rail, that sort of thing. We also are kind of in energy, a little bit in the industrial sector, commercial, you name it.
Wow. You have a fascinating perspective, having seen the industry evolve from the ground up. You mentioned starting your career with manual processes like cutting and taping addenda. How
Yeah.
has the sheer speed of technology changed from the early 2000s to today?
Yeah, it's funny to look back at that and think that it's been over 20 years now, since we were doing that. And honestly, in the early 2000s, it's not that long ago, really. And we had a lot of really good technology, but we were still using a lot of processes like, you mentioned there where, we'd get a project, the engineer, the architect would publish addenda during the procurement, and then we'd have to go and we'd print them all out in different colored sheets of paper, and we'd cut them and tape them across where they were at in the paper plans and the paper specs, and now
Hmm.
we've gotten to a point where almost nobody has paper. I mean, the only place you really see paper plans are, maybe I'll have one set in the job office. I may have a small set for one of, some folks that are, older, more senior that would like to have the paper to look at. But
Hmm.
the folks that are coming up in the field, they're digital natives. They are very comfortable with using graphic user interfaces. And what we've been able to do is really speed things up a lot from in the decision making process. So that decision making loop from, hey, we've got an issue to let's let somebody know about it and let's come up with a solution is a lot faster. So you look at
Hmm.
some of the cloud-based construction administration software out there. A lot of them have their own apps where you can just take a picture in your cell phone, little blurb. It goes all the way up the food chain to whoever needs to see it, and you maybe that afternoon or in an hour or two, you've got an answer to your question, which would have taken a couple days, before, and it would have sat in
Hmm.
somebody's email box, or you'd have had to make the phone call, or you'd have to
In the
go over
now
there and,
role.
and carry it by hand. Yeah, I mean, so.
Right. Yeah. So, with your background, including a PhD in engineering, you bring a unique technical lens. How do you see advanced knowledge like data science or AI principles becoming practically integrated into traditional construction management and field operations in the next few years?
We're just scratching the surface, honestly.
Hmm.
This is still very much baby steps. I think people are real excited about AI, real excited about machine learning. We've been using machine learning for a long time, which is
Hmm.
why we've been able to get to this kind of point where we're at right now. And I think what we're going to see is there's going to be growing adoption, right? With tools as they make sense and as they're integrated into those kind of processes beyond just kind of the sort of rudimentary stuff most people are using now, right? Like
Hmm.
hey, I've got to look something up instead of using Google. I use an LLM, right? And I
Hmm.
ask it some pointed questions and have it come up with some generate some knowledge or information I may not have had. Like today, I was working on an estimate, and I've gotten to where I'm asking it questions like, what's a reasonable range of cost for this specific type of work in this region in these conditions, right? And it'll give me something. Now I gotta I gotta make sure it makes sense, right? You treat it
Right.
like a black box, you're just gonna be running off, and you may not know what you got, right? So
Right.
the I think the important thing is we have to understand how it works. We have to understand what goes on behind the screen, behind the scene. So this is not going to replace anyone. I mean, truly. And if you want to be really, if you want to get really good at being able to use these tools, you need to learn how they work. You need to learn what their limitations are, and not just get caught up in the optimism, right? It's really easy to get overly optimistic about stuff. You see a lot of hype. You see a lot of folks who are pumping things up and hyping them up, and they're over promising. And what you want to do is you want to be able to understand and be very realistic. Really,
Hmm.
like a brutally realistic if you can be, and
Hmm.
understand what those limitations are, so that when other people are out there, caught with their pants down, like those lawyers last year who got disbarred because they let ChatGPT write their court case and it had a bunch of, you know, made up cases in there, right? Because, yeah, I mean, like that's the kind of stuff that can happen, right? And these guys are not dumb. Like they've got Juris Doctorates. I mean, they've got terminal degrees. These guys have passed the bar exam. It's a tough exam. It takes a long time to get to there, So, don't be that guy, I think. And, at the same time, though, I think what we're dealing with here is going to be, being able to use these tools is going to be the same as in the 90s being able to use a web browser. I
Hmm.
remember when my dad hooked up the internet at our house for the first time. And I was in school and I said, "What's this?" Is the internet? What is it? It's like a library, you know? Okay, how do you use it? I don't know. You know? So, you figured out how to use a web browser, all of a sudden it all opened up, right? And now we're kind of at another stage like that. So
Hmm.
it's exciting, but I think, we got to be cautiously optimistic, be strategic about what we're doing. And don't overextend yourself and think that don't be afraid to go and teach yourself and learn for yourself because it's all out there. You know, it really
Yeah.
is.
So you noted that technology's growth is exponential, but
Hmm.
construction is often slow to change. What are the biggest cultural or operational hurdles you see to adopting new transformative tools like AI? How do you help clients overcome that if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality?
That's a really good question, honestly, and I think you see in our industry things move at two paces. They're either glacial, right? And like
Hmm.
nothing changes, and then all of a sudden it's an avalanche, right? And and then everything moves very fast. Yeah, and so we've seen some of that here in our lifetimes, the last 5 years or so with the pandemic and everything. It shook up a lot of stuff, and things have moved pretty quick. I think the other thing you're going to see too is just with the changing of the guard, as we have these big retirements, coming starting to hit right now with the baby boomers. They're a lot of them are hanging on, but a lot of them are retiring, which is opening things up. So I'm starting to see, younger faces coming into decision making positions where they've got leadership and they're open to trying new things. And honestly, what I do, I specialize in alternative delivery, which is being able to get people who don't trust each other to work together and trust each other, right? To collaborate on that
Hmm.
stuff. And one of the things I always tell them, is that tell my clients is like, hey, if you've got folks in here, we can train them to do it. If you have the right personality, you can do it. But the kind of general rule of thumb is if you're over 40, you're in this room, I'm gonna have to work a lot harder with you to get you to adopt this, right? And
Hmm.
and I think it's just something that's it's just something that you'll see. The
Hmm.
older you get, the harder it is to change. I mean, and also you get you get less personal benefit, I think, out of it in a lot of ways. Or a lot less personal enjoyment out of it. Whereas folks who tend to be younger are much more open. So I think the thing is you got to tell the story, right? And you got to make a value proposition because we can talk about all these cool tools, we can talk about all the cool stuff and all the neat things, but if I can't show you how why it's worth actually putting in the time and effort to be able to do the adoption, right? It's not going to go anywhere. And the second piece of that is you got to have champions. You have to have a champion in that organization. So, if you've got a bunch of folks who are down, in the mid to low level, and they're like, yeah, yeah, we're gonna do it, and the folks at the top are like, no, pound sand, wait, just wait. That's not the time to do it, right?
Yeah.
You got to get executive buy-in, right?
Yeah.
So, and sometimes that's just walking them down the primrose path and saying, hey, here's what you think it is. Let me show you what it could be, right?
Right. So let's bring up this core concept, applying the Pareto Principle or the 80/20 rule to project management. Can you walk us through a real world example of applying the Pareto Principle to a project?
Yeah, so Pareto is a interesting fella. He was an Italian economist from the 1800s. Studied land ownership and wealth, and kind of stumbled upon this ratio about 80 to 20. And in construction, especially in construction project management, kind of the way that we look at this, the way that I like to look at this with my clients, and say, look, 80% of the value of your project is in 20% of the scope, right? 80% of what matters is in 20% of what you're going to do. So, if I'm looking at, say, for instance, highway project, and I'm doing asphalt paving. I look at my project, I may have 50, 100 pay items on that project. But if I go down there and I look at, okay, which of the pay items, starting with the ones that have the most, that are worth the most, right? And I add those up until that number there, that sum of whatever those pay items is roughly 80% of the total cost. You'll find that it's about 20% of the total project when it comes to the scope and when it comes to the actual activities. So the reason this is important is it lets you focus your time and effort, and I think the thing is you when we're doing project management, we're managing on the edge of chaos. There's too many things for us to be able to control. We don't have the time or the effort or the energy or even the authority necessary to control everything that we need that's going to affect our projects. You look at third-party stakeholders and stuff like that, authority holding jurisdictions, permitting,
Hmm.
economic impacts, supply chain, you don't get to control that stuff. So what we need to do is focus on what are the things that move the needle, and I want to manage those viciously, right? With malice and a forethought, right? I want to spend my time getting very, very sharp. I want to sharpen that pencil very, very sharp on the things that are going to move the needle. So if I'm looking at, in infrastructure projects, especially, you look at what's kind of the cardinal scope, those quantities, those cardinal pay items, those are the ones where if I'm looking at it, from in a unit price situation, especially, a small change in the quantity, a small change in the quality requirements can have a big change in the overall cost of the project. So, trying to keep my project, within the bounds of my budget and my schedule is crucial. And so I need to know that and communicate that with my designer and with my owner and my contractors and whatnot, and make sure that they understand, hey, this stuff cannot change, right? Here's what we have to manage. So if something happens here, it's a five-alarm fire every time. If it's one of my cardinal quantities or my cardinal pieces of the scope. The other 80% of the scope, though, however, is stuff that I'm going to manage by exception, right? Um, I'm gonna make sure it's got a spot. I'm gonna make sure it's got a plan. I'm gonna make sure we've got people doing it. But I'm not gonna spend any extra time trying to optimize that or improve it, right? I'm gonna let it happen. And if it becomes an issue, like I said, I'm gonna manage by exception. Then I'm gonna jump in and say, okay, what do we got to do to fix this, right? What do we have to do to make this right? But I don't have the ability to focused management on all of those things all at the same time. What I end up doing is just diluting my efforts as a project manager. So what I should be doing is, again, focus on the stuff that moves the needle, right? And
Hmm.
make sure you ride that pony hard because you want to stay in the budget, you want to finish on time. I mean, I've never met anybody so far, I would say so far in my professional career, who's ever been fired for finishing a project on time or on budget. You know,
Right. So,
that should be success, right? We should quantify success as that. If I'm on
hmm
time, if I'm on budget, great, right? Perfect. You won. You
hmm
know, because guess what? I had enough money to do it. I had enough time to do it. And then dun dun dun, I did it, right? And so
hmm
trying to play these games where it's like, well, you could have saved some of this and saved some of that. Well, you can optimize yourself into failure. It happens all the time, all the time. So, that's why I really like the Pareto principle. If I'm looking at going after a project, I'm going to do a quick, estimate. I want to focus in on what that 80% happens to be. That's what I'm going to focus on. And if it looks like it's doable, then I'm going to move forward, right? Same thing as if I'm looking at risk. Risk is the same thing, right? I can
hmm
use the same thing. So 20% of my risk items of risk are 80% of my risk in my project. So
So essentially building a critical path that focuses only on the 20% of tasks that are truly time sensitive. And what is your strategy for ensuring the non-critical tasks don't advertently become bottlenecks?
well, the thing with those is you've got to you got to plan, right?
Hmm.
So as I'm planning yeah, my project, as I'm scheduling it, as I'm putting together my work packages, and I'm putting together, I'm going to have my subcontracting plan and all that stuff. I'm going to make sure everything has a home. Everything has somebody who's responsible for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as the project manager, that may not be me on everything, right? Project managers are generalists. They're in charge of everything. And so what I want are the folks who are functional area managers to be in charge of those things. Functional managers are superintendents and foremen, right? They're your subcontractors and suppliers. And I'm going to delegate that to them. And so if it's something that's not in that cardinal scope, right? And I don't have to personally manage it, right? I'm going to delegate it. I'm going to give it to somebody else. And of course, check on them, right? But I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time trying to make sure, like if you're working for me, Skylar, and I said, hey, I need you to go make sure all the reflectors go in on this road when we're done here, right? I'm not going to call you 3 times a day. Hey, where are the reflectors at? Hey, did you get them? Hey, did you have this and that? I'm going to let you
Mm-hmm.
go do your job, right? Just go do
Right.
the job, right? You're going to handle it. I trust you. You're competent. You know, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to be on the phone making sure that the batch plant has material, right? Hey,
Mm-hmm.
making sure it's ready to go and my trucks are ready, right? And my crews are all warmed up and everything, you know. And,
Yeah. It's a
and
solid
so
point. Yeah.
yeah, you got to be able to delegate, if you want to get
Mm-hmm.
into management, you want to get into leadership, because you just can't do it all yourself.
No. So your focus on efficiency and the 80/20 rule makes construction a ripe environment for AI adoption, which is where we specialize. Where do you see the most immediate and high impact opportunities for AI to solve persistent pain points?
So I think one of the interesting things about machine learning in specifically is that you have the ability to identify underlying trends which may not be readily obvious
Mm-hmm.
to the observer, right? So being able to do the kind of gritty analysis, especially with things that like unsorted data, that's what I love about it, right? I don't have to go through and clean all my data up, right? I can dump the data in, I can let it do its thing, I can have it, I can do split train test, and then
Mm-hmm.
off we go. And
Yeah.
so I think, one of the things that I think there's a lot of opportunity for is risk management. One of the things you see in risk management is, by and large, most owners don't do a very good job of it. They're really not very savvy. The folks that do a really good job of risk management tend to be contractors, and they tend to be folks who are out there, having to make a profit, right, on the work they
Mm-hmm.
do. So with owners, you see a lot of times they will kind of treat risk management sort of as a kind of an afterthought, or they won't put the time and effort into being able to really do a good job of developing what's the profile, the risk of this project, right? And looking
Mm-hmm.
back historically and saying what's happened before. So I mean, there's nothing wrong with using professional judgment if that's all you have. But in my experience, almost all of the risk plans, risk registers that I've seen from my clients, both at the federal level, at the state level, at the municipal, even international level, they're mostly using professional judgment. That's getting a bunch of folks that look kind of like me and a little more old and wrinkly, going, well, we think, I saw this on the last one, so I might be one here. What do you think, Bob? I mean, and if you got folks who have a lot of experience, right? Which is great. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, though, wouldn't it be great if I could be able to say, okay, how many times have I thought I had this risk and it's been realized? Be able to
Mm-hmm.
come up with a number, right? And how many times have I did realize it? How much did it cost me then, right? What did I have to spend to be able to mitigate that risk? And if I can figure those two things out, I can come up with a very good rational contingency and be able to quantify my risk both in time and money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the things that you need as a project manager to be able to manage those. Is I gotta have money in there to deal with the unexpected. And one of the things that is really hard to do is to sift through data, right? Sift through all that stuff. So I think there's a big opportunity there for that. I also think we're going to see more automated design. where, we're going to have, a lot of the rudimentary stuff is gonna be taken care of. I got a colleague in Germany, who I worked for back in the 90s, at the University of Stuttgart, who had a number of years ago, he was working on a project where they had a automated CAD design program for designing aircraft, and essentially it would lay out all of the electrical lines and controls and everything, and you set the parameters. Hey, so many turns or twists or whatever it happens to be, and it would optimize the system. Then you just went back in and you adjusted it, right? Instead of going in there and like, doing like cat jockeys do and trying to draw it all up in digits. So
Yeah. So specifically, where can AI help contractors achieve growth by boosting lead generation or automating those tedious administrative jobs?
I think one of the things that's kind of, maybe a little untapped right now is just on the business development side. You know, I think we do have a lot of stuff going out, some of these kind of cold call marketing, services, which they're okay. But once you've seen one, you recognize what it is. You're like, there's no person on the other end of this. My colleague Mark has, found this thing for you, and it's like, yeah, you okay, Mark, right? Um, but I think where you have the opportunity is where you can go and find those sort of niche, maybe not even niche, but like projects, opportunities, you know, capability gaps and that kind of stuff where you can identify that and then be able to focus your time on that, right? Because, I don't know if you've ever if you've done the whole conference circuit, or gone to like the trade shows and the expos and stuff. Those are
Mhm.
okay, but you look at how much time and money and effort you spend, putting together a booth, buying a bunch of swag, coming up with some kind of whiz bang thing, talking to people, handing out free t-shirts, trying to, get people to come in and do like drawings and stuff so they'll come in
Mhm.
and look at your thing, right? You spend a ton of money, like some of those ones. I mean, you're talking, 15, 20, 30, 40,000 bucks sometimes. I mean, the bigger ones are even a little bit bigger than that, right? You look how much money you spend on that. Where if I could do the same thing more focused, and where I could just, have that go, okay, where do I need to go find, where are my customers at, right? Where are my
Right.
clients at? Where's the opportunity? Where are the projects? And then
Right.
focus my time where I can go do that personally, right? I can go
Right.
make that human contact, do
Mhm.
like you and I are doing right here, which
Mhm.
is people talking. I mean, at the end of the day, the AI will work where it helps people do the things that they do well better, right? So I, from you know our business is reputational. You know, if you've got a good reputation, you can run with it. It takes a long time to build one up. It's real easy to lose, but
Mhm.
if you can good and get in there, you can develop those reputations, right? Or those relationships. That's the stuff that keeps coming back because it's the same principle, with when I'm looking at any project, right? I don't want to make my money on this project. I want to come back and I want to make my money on the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one, right? I want to, if this is a good client, I want to develop them. I want to turn it into a multi-year relationship. So I think
Mhm.
that's something that there's some opportunity for growth in. So
For
my
sure.
2 cents.
Mhm. So, as a consultant yourself, what value do you see in a specialized AI agency like ours, which focuses exclusively on the construction industry?
Well, I think it's like I kind of think like what I said at the start. You have to have a real good value proposition. You
Hmm.
know, Yeah, you got to be able to very quickly, very readily, very easily show, the value in what you do. And honestly, with any kind of new organization, new company, new firm, you're gonna have to spend some time developing relationships
Hmm.
and going after opportunities. And sometimes that's going after the ones that maybe aren't your top one, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes that's going after smaller. projects, smaller clients, and getting some experience, right? And then I think the other piece too is just getting face time and getting very familiar with what are the things that cause difficulties, for your clients. So, if I'm working for a contractor, I know in the public sector, one of the things it's a big pain point is getting paid, you know, and it's not every owner's the same, right? If I work for the feds, oftentimes they got a prompt payment clause, where they're going to turn the pay around 30 days, sometimes less. If I'm working for a municipality or like a university or something like that, right? It can vary wildly. I mean, there's folks I know where they'll quibble over 5 cents, because you rounded something in a Excel spreadsheet, you turn it to a PDF. Now the accountant can't see the trailing pennies on the back there, and they're holding up a $500,000 payout because they're chasing pennies, right? So that's kind of stuff where you look at it, okay, how do I get ahead of that, right? How do I deal with that? The carrying cost is huge. I pay if I'm paying labor, I'm paying them on the weekly, and I'm having to
Mhm.
wait to get paid once a month, which means I have to borrow money or I have to float that cash, right, to get me up until the point where I'm telling them getting revenue neutral. So I think being able to identify things like pay applications, automate some of that stuff so it takes the guesswork out of it. I mean, honestly, anything that has to go through and get approved, I want it to not be a surprise, right? I should be as like just like the train schedule, right? You show up on, you leave on time, right? It's like a perfectly wound machine, and that kind of certainty is what builds in your ability to deal with uncertainty, right? So
Mhm.
I think, when you look at those sorts of things, the other piece, with like a company like yourself is you got to be able to differentiate yourself, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of open access to tools that people have never had access to, are publicly available, right? The bar of
Mhm.
entry is low, and a lot of things can be done for very little or free, essentially, other than just your own kind of labor, so you got to be able to figure out what is the special thing that you do, right? And it may take you a while to figure that out, right? But I think spending time face to face with your market, getting out in the field, doing some other stuff maybe that's adjacent to what your main business is, right?
Mhm.
And then just developing those relationships, because relationships are everything, man. And it's the kind of stuff where if I know a guy who's like, oh, I know this guy, I'll give you a call and send you his number, right? That
Mhm.
it's the word of mouth stuff is where all the good work comes from. It's it's
Yeah.
it's not from going chasing it yourself. That's very rare. I mean, it's especially as a consultant, it's the referrals, you know.
Referrals are king. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So you gave great advice about being brutally honest and never over promising, noting that reputation is literally everything. How does a focus on clear, measurable deliverabilities like those provided by AI solutions help a consultant build the trust required to thrive in these fields?
Well, I think, part of it is making living up to your word. So if I say I'm going to have something to you at this time, I have it to them, you know.
Hmm.
If I'm able to do more than is asked, right, of me, more than is expected, you get this, it generates a lot of really, positive goodwill.
Hmm.
If I have a client that expects me to do something and I give them way more than they asked for, um, they're going to go, wow, that's great. Thank you so much. It's like we're just working. We got a new contract with Indian Health Services. We're updating all of their cost estimating location factors for lower 48 and Alaska, right? Which all these remote places, difficult to figure out how much things cost out in the middle of nowhere, right?
Hmm.
So being able to come in and say, okay, hey, we've got everything down. We got the barging costs and everything. I know who the helicopter pilots are that can fly into Supai out in Arizona, where it's a reservation where there's no road. It's in a
Hmm.
it's in a canyon, right? You either got to walk in on mule or you fly in by helicopter, right? Being able to pull some of that stuff up and give them, it faster or sooner or be more responsive, to be more engaged. And I think where you see AI tools being able to play a role in that is that they can help you essentially spread your capability, right? Expand upon your capability, your capacity. If I don't have to spend 8 hours trying to figure something out, and I can use an AI tool that'll cut 6 of those hours out, and I can only focus on what I have to do, and I can do it in 2 hours. That's 6 more hours I have that I could do something else, right? That
Right.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't have otherwise been able to do. So I mean, I think there's like I said, we're just scratching the surface, and a lot of folks are trying to say they know what's going to happen or know what's going to be out there. I think it's going to be interesting, and it's going to be a little different than we all expect. It's
Hmm.
also not going to be as terrible as some people prognosticate, and it's not going to be as golden and amazing as others like to do. We'll find it'll be
Hmm.
somewhere kind of in between there. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Interesting. All right, Nils. If a contractor listening today could only take one action to improve their business this week, what would you advise them to focus on?
Man, that's a tough question. You just save your hardest ones for the end here, right?
Yeah, got to.
Well, I think when you look at the business, it's a tough business. If you're in the hard bid, competitive bid world, right? You got to beat the idiots. You gotta put in bids together that get underneath the guy with the biggest error in his estimate or his bid, and you got to still be able to turn around and make a profit on it, right?
Hmm.
And the way you can make a profit on it is you got to know where your money's at. You got to know where what you're working with, right? So be an expert on your business. Be an expert on your market. You know your subs and suppliers, or maybe you are a sub or a supplier, right, or a vendor. You should be the expert in everything you do. And when you sign a contract with an owner, you sign a contract with a client, read the dang contract. I don't know how many times I've run into folks who have they've given it a cursory glance or they've never looked at it, they don't know where it is. Gransberg's 3 rules of moderate success in contracting are: one, read the contract; two, do everything the contract says you're supposed to do, right? And that way you won't be in breach because you failed to do something. And rule 3 is also, a real tough one here, right? Whatever it says not to do, don't do. Right? So if the contract says don't do this, then just don't do it, right? And if you have read your contract, you know what's expected of you, right? If you do everything it says you're supposed to do, they can't say you failed to do this, right? And if you don't do the things you're told not to, no one can say, hey, you did this wrong, you breached it, right? And even at the end of the day, if everything goes sideways, you're going to be the one who's going, it's not me, right? And you just might find a lifeline in there that you didn't realize. So it's a tough job. It's satisfying too. There's nothing more satisfying than being able to see the work of your hands at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Being able to drive past a project after it's done, with your kids or your family and go, yeah, I
Hmm.
built that building, right? Or this
Yeah.
is my bridge, or I built this road. I mean, it's as satisfying as it gets, man.
Yeah.
So
It's a good feeling. Yeah. Your insights on applying advanced engineering principles and leveraging AI for growth were extremely insightful. Thank you for sharing the blueprint for optimizing project management and building a more efficient construction business. We'll catch you on the next time on Blueprint for Profit.
thanks, Skylar. Have a great evening.
Yep, thank you, Nels.